If you want to build an electric guitar or kits, stay with me. I'll be continuing my unofficial build for the Great Guitar Build-Off competition. I'll be going step by step and showing methods and tools which you may already have and can handle. So stick around. Let's build a guitar. Hi, I'm Yoav and this is the Electric Luthier. Today we'll continue in the 6th part of the guitar I'm making for the Great Guitar Build-Off. Today I'll finalize the shape of the neck, give it a 12-inch radius and fret it. I'll also give it a layer of true oil. So let's get shaping. In order to get the heel of the neck to properly fit, not just the size but also the shape, I'll first need to put it in place. My templates and cutting were accurate enough so that only final sanding is really needed to achieve a very tight fit. Now I can flip the body over and mark the exact shape I'm aiming for. The headstock needs to be thinned to 15 millimeters or half an inch. I measure it and scribe the sides for reference. This can be done in various methods, and I originally thought of building a jig for it that would let the router slide back and forth with additional sideways motion. Then I thought of using my table as the slide and using this straight bit to slowly and carefully eat away the extra thickness. I set the height of the blade to the marked depth of the headstock and start sliding it back and forth, pushing from side to side against the rotation of the blade, of course. I start very carefully holding the neck firmly with 2 hands. I make sure that I'm not moving too fast or trying to bite off too large a chunk. A bit with a half-inch diameter has the ability to remove a lot of material, but can also tear it apart or send it flying if mishandled. I continue with small steps till the area where I need to start rounding. I'll continue in much of the same method, but I'll switch to a large round blade for the router. This round blade will give me the radius I want at the base of the headstock. A few more back and forth motions and I get a nice round bevel. The top of the headstock has been thinned and it just needs a little sanding to level out some blade marks and a bit that wasn't properly removed with a round bit. I've even exposed, as planned, the truss rod access area. Time to flip it to the back and take care of the volute. I'll mark a round border for it and start filing to finish the roundness of the neck and merge it smoothly to the volute and the back of the headstock. There's a fine balance between using rougher files and rasps to get there faster and going too far quickly. I keep checking myself every few strokes and always tackle the areas which have the most material to be removed. The volute acts as a structural as well as a decorative element. It gives the neck a bit of extra thickness where it is thinnest. I work around with round and flat files until I estimate the tool marks that I'm making are getting too rough and switch to sanding. I start with about 100 grit and sand till the whole area is both smooth and uniform. I now flip it over again to give the front its final shape and improve the truss rod access. I'm not planning on a cover here, and I want to round the hard edges a bit to better fit the overall line flow of the design. I'm creating some grooves for the strings to go over from the nut to the pegs. This is more of a decorative element, and I'm not completely sure about it yet, but I did leave enough material there that I can just file it off. Next is the heel, which I already marked. I start with the rasp to just remove the thicker parts. Then it's the files removing bit by bit until it's close enough for sanding. When I'm finished, I'm very happy with the whole neck shape and I'm ready for the fretboard. To get started, I put masking tape on the radius block and some 80 grit sandpaper. I super glue them and get to sanding. There's no jig or fancy tools necessary here. The only issue is to maintain the center line. There are two tricks to do that. One is marking the top of the fretboard with a pencil. You want the pencil marks to slowly disappear as you're sanding, first from the sides and at last from the center line. If they're removed evenly from both sides, it means you're okay. When the center is cleared, that's when you're done. The second way I try to maintain the center when radiusing is simply keeping my index finger aiming forward and in the middle. Try to maintain long flowing strokes and not to get caught up in one area. That's a recipe for an uneven fretboard. When the pencil marks are gone, I check it with a radius gauge and it looks perfect. I sand it with a leveling beam or long flat blocks to avoid ruining the radius. I want to take both the fretboard and the whole neck up to at least 400 grit or even 600. I mean, can the neck be too smooth? The side dots are the last step before fretting. I measure and mark them. These can easily be over drilled and I use my old hand drill with a 2mm bit. Since I'm going to leave it overnight anyway, I opt for carpenter's glue and not super glue. After all the dots are in place, I do one last touch up on the now radiused front dots. A dab of super glue and some rosewood dust will do the trick. The next day I start with the front dots. I put some masking tape around the two dots I need to sand so I can start with rougher paper and not scratch the fretboard. I then move to finer paper and keep long, gentle strokes. I cut and scrape the side dots. Some sanding is also due. And I also sand the side, the top, and the back of the neck one final time before fretting. It's going to be very difficult to sand it after you fret it. Before I jump into fretting, please take a moment and subscribe below, and you may want to also hit the little bell to get notified when my next video comes out. Now feel free to comment or ask me about anything I've missed in the comments below. And I also welcome you to my website, theelectricluthier.com, with dozens of articles on guitar building. I want to get my ducks and my frets in a row. I roughly measure and cut 24 frets and put them on masking tape. If you don't stick them or contain them somehow, they will start jumping around as soon as you start hammering. Now these are medium jumbo frets and you need a good sharp cutter to handle them. The small $5 ones may work for thinner ones, but not for the jumbos. Don't even try cutting stainless frets with those. I'll get the slots ready for the frets in 3 steps. First, I'll run the fret saw through them to both clean them from any dust or particles and to verify that they're deep enough. Second, I will file and chamfer the edges of each slot. This will make the insertion easier. It will avoid chipping if I make a mistake and need to pull a fret out. And whoever ever does the refretting on this neck will also thank me. A small triangular file will make this very easy. Third and last is the glue. I use a syringe from a kid's medicine for better aim, and I fill 4 to 6 slots at a time and wipe the excess with a wet rag. I use my upgraded brass fretting hammer There's a link in the top right corner to the upgrade video. It feels great and seems to have just enough oomph. The real test is when leveling. It's hot and dry, and notice how fast the wood dries, so I don't want the glue to dry on me and make a mess. If you're using super glue, you may want to apply it in the same manner or wick it in after installing the frets. The glue we put around or under the frets is not really meant for holding the frets. The little barbs on the frets tangs do that. The glue is just there to fill the gaps and create a more solid and uniform fretboard. It is said to also improve the sustain. Now when cutting the frets and the tips, make sure to cut from side to side. Otherwise, you may bend the tang or the fret itself. It's also good practice to cut the tips after each fret. The cutter is often too wide to fit between them, and you will not be able to cut straight. When the frets are in place and all the tips are cut, it's time for filing the tips. This is done with a file that is embedded at about 30 degrees in a wooden block. This gives a nice angle to the tips. There are similar blocks with a file at 90 degrees to better file the sides. I use the angled one, but I also play with the angle I'm holding it to get to best of both worlds. The filing usually starts very rough and gets a little smoother as you progress. If there's one fret that was cut a little longer, I may give it some personal attention, but it's mostly just repetitive filing until you start to feel and hear that you're touching the fretboard. Running the fingers along the side is the best indication to when you're done. We still need to dress and smooth the tips as well as level the whole fretboard. But for now, we just want the tips to be flush with the fretboard and have a bit of an angle. Let's turn to the nut. I have a black tusk Graphtec nut which will fit the rest of the hardware. I mark the thickness after the 0 fret position and make a cut with a fret saw. Now my 6mm chisel is just too wide. Did I mention I need to get some more delicate tools? I use a chisel from the side of the cut to remove most of the material and then file the rest till it's a good fit. The exact depth will be determined with the strings on. Staining and oiling the fretboard can usually wait a bit longer, but I want to give my fretboard a bit more protection as soon as I can. I didn't want to oil it up before the glue of the frets, but now it's time. I protect the rest of the neck and give it a layer of the same teak tinted oil I used for the body. I remove any residue because the last thing you want is a sticky fretboard. And then I leave it overnight. The next day I take the masking tape off and focus on the holes. I did a lot of measuring and checking to get the pegs close enough at the 3rd and 4th strings. They will be pretty much touching at the back, but should be fine from the front, and with a bit of luck no string trees will be needed. I mark the pilot holes with my hand drill. Even if there is any chipping, it will be removed. I drill the 10mm holes from the back, about halfway, and then flip it and drill the other half, again to avoid any chipping. This is even better done with the drill press, but in my opinion, a sharp wooden drill bit is the one thing to not be cheap about. That'll give a clean edge to the holes. After some light sanding, I turn to the little ledge behind the nut. I want to give it another chance before removing it. I try and give it a rounder and more organic look, but still no. Oh well, A couple of minutes and it's sanded away. Before I give the neck its first and another layer of true oil for the body, I want to brand the neck and the body. I have a brass plate custom made with my signature, and after a few tests on scrap pieces of wood, it's ready. I heat it up with a torch, and when it's hot enough, just press it firmly. It's kind of a one-try thing, although you can always sand it and do it again. I sand it very lightly with steel wool, just to remove a bit of the burnt edges and make it clear. I do the same for the body. This is really just for the fun of it. I'll now get everything ready for a layer of true oil. Clean all the dust off. I start with the body. This is the fourth layer, I think, and I really need very little oil here. Having all that excess oil also gives the neck a good coating. Look at that beautiful mahogany. It just lights up with a little oil. Giving a last touch to the body, and I'll hang it to dry overnight. Things are really starting to shape up, and it'll soon be a guitar. Join me next time when I start putting it all together and have fun with soldering. If you want to know when that's coming, hit the subscribe button below and don't forget the little bell for the notification. I also welcome you to ask and comment below, and come visit my website, theelectricluthier.com, with much more information on guitar building. But don't just read it, anyone can do that. Go build a guitar.